The stars had never looked so terrifying. Admiral Xyrax stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the blue planet grow larger in the viewing screen. Earth. The humans called it Earth. Such a small world, he thought. Such weak creatures living on it. The Varaxian Empire had conquered over 300 worlds across the galaxy. This one would be no different. Behind his massive ship, 12,000 warships stretched across the darkness of space like an endless river of metal and fire. Battlecruisers, destroyers, carrier ships loaded with fighter crafts, and planet-killing weapons that could turn entire continents into ash. The fleet had been gathering for 2 standard years, pulling forces from every corner of the Empire. The High Council wanted to make an example of the humans. They wanted the galaxy to see what happened when a young species refused to bow. Xyrax remembered the first contact with humans 50 years ago. His people had expected the usual response from primitive species: fear, submission, begging for mercy. Instead, the humans had smiled, shaken hands, and asked to trade technology. When the Empire demanded tribute and obedience, the humans had laughed. They actually laughed. They said they answered to no one. They said they were free people and would remain free. The insult had burned through the Empire like wildfire. No species in galactic history had ever refused the Varaxian Empire. Wars had been fought over less, but the High Council had waited. They watched the humans carefully. They studied their weapons, their ships, their military strength. Everything they found told them the same thing. Humans were weak. Their technology was basic. Their ships were slow and poorly armed. Their weapons could barely scratch Varaxian armor. An invasion would be easy, almost too easy now. As the fleet approached Earth, Xyrax allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. His officers moved around the bridge with calm efficiency. They had done this many times before. The routine was simple: arrive with overwhelming force, demand surrender. If the enemy refused, destroy their military, bomb their cities, and take their world. Slaves would be gathered, resources would be extracted, another planet would join the Empire. On Earth, the mood was very different. President Sarah Chen stood in the underground command center, watching the same fleet that Admiral Xyrax commanded. The images came from satellites and long-range sensors. 12,000 ships. The number was almost impossible to understand. Earth's entire combined fleet was only 800 vessels. Most of them were small patrol ships or cargo transports that had been quickly fitted with weapons. They had built as many ships as they could in the past 50 years, knowing this day would come. It was not enough. It would never be enough. General Marcus Stone stood beside her, his face hard as rock. He had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. Every war game, every training exercise, every new weapon system had been designed with one enemy in mind: the Varaxians. And now they were here, and everything he had built seemed so small. The communication officer turned in her chair. "The enemy fleet is requesting a channel," she said. "They want to speak with our leaders." President Chen took a deep breath. "Put them through." The massive viewing screen flickered, and Admiral Xyrax appeared. He was tall, nearly 8 feet, with gray skin covered in scales and 4 arms crossed over his chest. His eyes were yellow and cold, like a snake watching a mouse. "Humans," he said, his voice rumbling through the speakers. "You have one chance. Surrender your world. Bow to the Varaxian Empire. Your people will serve us, but you will live. Refuse, and we will burn your cities, poison your oceans, and leave your planet a dead rock floating in space. Choose." President Chen felt the weight of every human life on her shoulders. 7 billion people looked to her for protection. 7 billion people trusted her to keep them safe. She wanted to agree. She wanted to save them, but she knew what Varaxian rule meant: slavery, suffering, the death of everything that made humanity special. She looked at General Stone. He gave her a small nod. "Admiral Z," she said, keeping her voice steady, "the people of Earth thank you for your offer, but we must decline. We were born free, and we will die free. If you want our world, you will have to take it from our cold, dead hands." Xyrax's yellow eyes widened slightly. He had not expected this. A smile crossed his face, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Then you have chosen death. Human. So be it." The screen went dark. All around the Earth, sirens began to wail. In every city, in every town, in every small village, people looked up at the sky. They knew what was coming. They had been preparing for years. Civil defense shelters opened their doors. Families rushed underground. Children cried as their parents carried them to safety. The world held its breath. In the command center, General Stone gave his orders. "Launch all fighters, all ships to defensive positions. Ground-based weapons hot. Tell everyone to prepare for the fight of their lives." 800 ships rose to meet 12,000. It was madness. It was suicide. Every person in that room knew the math. They were outgunned 15 to 1. Their weapons were inferior. Their shields were weaker. They would fight because fighting was all they could do, but they would lose. There was no doubt about that. Yet President Chen noticed something strange. General Stone did not look defeated. He looked calm, almost peaceful, as if he knew something that no one else knew. "General," she said quietly, stepping close to him, "is there something you want to tell me?" Stone turned to her. His eyes held a spark that she had not seen before. "Madam President," he said softly, "do you believe in secrets?" Before she could answer, the first Varaxian weapons fired. The sky above Earth lit up with deadly light. The battle had begun. In deep space, far beyond the battle, something massive and dark floated silently. It was hidden behind the moon of Jupiter, in the shadow where no sensors could reach. It had been there for 30 years, waiting, growing. A single red light blinked on its hull. After 3 decades of sleep, it was waking up. A message arrived, transmitted through channels that officially did not exist. The message was simple, just 2 words: Phoenix Protocol. Deep inside the hidden vessel, ancient systems hummed to life. Power flowed through circuits that had never been tested in combat. Weapons armed themselves. Engines that burned with the fire of captured stars began to glow. And in the captain's chair, a man who had spent half his lifetime waiting for this moment opened his eyes. Captain James Rook was 62 years old, but he felt like a young soldier again. He looked at his crew, 200 men and women who had trained in secret, who had given up normal lives, who had lived in this metal tomb for years without complaint. "It is time," he said simply. The ship began to move, sliding out of the shadows like a predator leaving its cave. It was enormous, nearly 3 miles long, built in pieces over 30 years, and assembled in total secrecy. No one in the Varaxian Empire knew it existed. No one on Earth outside a handful of people knew either. It was humanity's greatest secret, their hidden card, their last hope. The ship's name was painted in massive letters on its hull. Prometheus, the titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. An appropriate name for what this ship was about to do. Captain Rook smiled grimly as the engines roared to full power. "Let us go introduce ourselves to our guests," he said. Prometheus shot forward into the darkness of space, heading straight for the battle that would decide the fate of humanity. The space around Earth became a nightmare of fire and death. Human ships rushed forward to meet the Varaxian fleet, their weapons blazing against shields that barely noticed the attack. Commander Lisa Park led the first wave from her destroyer, the Iron Wolf. She had 40 ships under her command, the best pilots in the fleet, and she knew they were all going to die. "Fire everything," she shouted over the communication channel. "Target their weapon systems. Aim for the gaps in their armor." Missiles streaked across the void, followed by beams of concentrated energy. The attacks hit the Varaxian ships and did almost nothing. Their shields absorbed the damage like water swallowing stones. In return, the alien weapons spoke with terrible power. 3 human ships exploded in the first 10 seconds, then 5 more, then 8. Commander Park watched her friends die on the tactical display. Each bright light that vanished was a ship, a crew. Hundreds of lives ended in an instant. The Iron Wolf shook as a glancing blow from a Varaxian beam melted half of her starboard armor. Warning lights filled the bridge. Smoke poured from damaged systems. "Keep fighting," she ordered, even as tears streamed down her face. "We keep fighting until we cannot fight anymore." On the command bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Xerax watched the slaughter with bored amusement. The humans were brave, he admitted. Stupid, but brave. Their tiny ships threw themselves against his fleet like insects attacking a mountain. It made no difference. It never made any difference. "Status report," he demanded. His tactical officer responded immediately. "We have destroyed 112 human vessels. We have lost none. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields. At this rate, their entire fleet will be eliminated within 2 hours. Xerax nodded. "Launch the bombers. Begin the ground assault. I want their cities burning by nightfall." Across the fleet, hangar doors opened. Thousands of bomber craft poured out like angry wasps leaving a nest. Each one carried enough weapons to level a city block. They formed into squadrons and began descending toward Earth, protected by fighter escorts that numbered in the tens of thousands. On the ground, people watched the sky with horror. The battle was visible even in daylight, flashes of light and explosions marking the deaths of those who fought above, and now darker shapes appeared against the clouds. The bombers were coming. Anti-aircraft weapons opened fire. Missiles rose from hidden launchers. Laser batteries tracked the incoming craft and filled the air with deadly light. Some bombers fell, trailing smoke and flame as they crashed into the ocean or empty fields. But for every one that fell, 10 more took its place. The first bombs struck a military base in Europe. The explosion was so bright that people 50 miles away had to shield their eyes. When the light faded, there was nothing left but a crater. Not rubble, not ruins, just a hole in the earth where thousands of soldiers had been stationed moments before. More bombs fell. Targets across every continent erupted in fire. The Varaxians were not trying to conquer, they were trying to punish. They wanted humanity to suffer before they died in the underground command center. President Chen gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. The screens showed destruction on a scale she had never imagined. Cities burning, military bases gone, ships dying in space one after another. This was not a battle. This was an execution. "General Stone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "if you have anything, now would be the time." Stone looked at his watch. 47 minutes, he said calmly. "We need to hold for 47 more minutes." Chen stared at him. What happens in 47 minutes? Stone met her eyes, something they do not expect on space. Commander Park had lost half her fleet. The Iron Wolf was dying around her, systems failing one by one, fires burned in 3 sections. The medical bay had reported over 60 wounded and twice that many dead, and still they fought. A massive Varaxian battlecruiser turned its main weapon toward her ship. Park saw the weapon powering up, saw the glow of energy gathering in its barrel. This was the end. She had always known it would come, but she had hoped to take more of them with her. It was an honor to fight with you, she said to her surviving crew. And with you, Commander, her first officer replied, his voice steady despite everything. The Varaxian weapon fired, but the shot never reached the Iron Wolf. A wall of golden light appeared between them, absorbing the deadly beam like it was nothing. Park blinked in confusion. That was not any technology she knew of. That was not any human shield system she had ever seen. What was that? She breathed. The answer came from her senses, which had suddenly lit up with a contact so large that the system initially flagged it as an error. Something was approaching the battlefield at impossible speed. Something massive. Something that should not exist. Admiral Zirax saw it too. His tactical display screamed warnings as the new contact emerged from behind the moon. 3 miles long, heavily armed, moving faster than anything that Psi should be able to move. And most disturbing of all, it was completely unknown. His databases held information on every ship design from every species in the galaxy. This thing matched nothing. What is that? He demanded. His officers scrambled to analyze the approaching vessel. Unknown configuration, one said. Unknown weapons systems. Unknown shield technology. It appears to be human in origin. Impossible, Zirax snapped. Humans do not have the capability to build something like that. Yet there it was, growing larger on his screen with every passing second. The ship cut through the battle like a knife through water. Varaxian fighters that got too close simply stopped existing, swatted aside by weapons that moved faster than the eye could follow. Captain Rook stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching the enemy fleet with cold satisfaction. 30 years of hiding, 30 years of building and waiting and hoping this day would never come. But it had come, and he was ready. Opened a channel to the enemy fleet. He ordered, let them know we are here. John Channel opened. Captain Rook straightened in his chair. Varaxian fleet, this is Captain James Rook of the Earth defense ship Prometheus. You have attacked our world. You have killed our people. You have made a terrible mistake. On his bridge, Zirax listened to the message with growing unease. There was something in the human's voice, not fear, not desperation, confidence. The human actually believed he could win. You are one ship, Zirax replied, forcing contempt into his voice. We are 12,000. Surrender now, and I might let your crew die quickly. Rook laughed. A genuine, honest laugh. One ship, yes, one ship that has been waiting for you for 3 decades. One ship built with technologies you cannot imagine. One ship designed for one purpose only. You to defeat you should have come 50 years ago, Admiral, before we were ready, before we built this. He turned to his weapons officer. Show them what we can do. The Prometheus fired its main weapon for the first time in history. A beam of pure white light, bright as a star, lanced across space. It struck a Varaxian battlecruiser dead center. The enemy ship did not explode. It did not break apart. It simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, and the next moment it was atoms drifting in the void. Silence fell across both fleets. Every eye, human and Varaxian alike, was fixed on the spot where a ship had been and now was not. No one had ever seen a weapon like that. No one had known such a thing was possible. Admiral Zirax felt something he had not felt in over 50 years of war. He felt afraid. Captain Rook smiled grimly as the Prometheus moved forward, its weapons charging for another shot. That was the first, he announced to the Varaxian fleet. There will be many more. I suggest you run. The battle was about to change. Admiral Zirax made a decision that went against every instinct he had developed over his long career. Instead of attacking the unknown vessel, he ordered his fleet to stop. He needed information. He needed to understand what he was facing before he committed his forces. All ships hold position, he commanded. Tactical analysis. Now, I want to know everything about that weapon. His officers worked frantically at their stations, studying the sensor data from the destroyed battle. What they found made their blood run cold. The weapon appears to be some form of focused antimatter beam, the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking slightly. It did not destroy the target in the conventional sense. It converted the matter of the ship directly into energy. Complete molecular breakdown. Nothing survived. Not even debris. Zirax processed this information slowly. Antimatter weapons were known to the Empire, but nothing on this scale. Nothing that could be focused into a beam. Nothing that could erase a ship from existence so completely. How is this possible? He asked. Humans are a primitive species. They do not have the technology for this. No one could answer him. The impossible ship hung in space before them, gleaming like a sword made of starlight. It was waiting, watching, almost mocking them with its presence. On the Prometheus, Captain Rook studied the enemy fleet with satisfaction. The aliens had stopped their attack on Earth. Their bombers were turning back. Their fighters were forming defensive formations around the larger ships. Fear was spreading through their ranks. He could almost taste it. Status report. He asked his tactical officer. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, daughter of the president and one of the finest officers in the secret fleet, checked her displays. All weapon systems are fully operational. Shields at maximum. The main cannon is recharged and ready to fire again. Secondary batteries are targeting multiple enemy vessels. Rook nodded. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Every second they hesitate is a second our people survive. The secret of the Prometheus was not just advanced technology. It was time. For 30 years, the best scientists on Earth had worked in hidden facilities, studying every scrap of alien technology they could find. When the first contact with the Varaxians had happened, human intelligence services had done more than just talk. They had watched. They had listened. They had stolen. The spies had infiltrated alien outposts on the edges of known space. Probes had been sent to wreckage sites of old battles between galactic powers. Captured equipment had been taken apart and studied piece by piece. Every advantage, every trick, every secret that humanity could find had been gathered and analyzed, and then came the breakthrough. 12 years after first contact, a human science team had cracked the fundamental physics behind Varaxian shields, but they did not just copy the technology. They improved it. Human creativity, human ingenuity, human stubbornness had taken alien science and made something new, something better. The Prometheus was the result. Every system on the ship was a blend of the best alien technology and human innovation. Shields that could absorb energy and use it to strengthen themselves. Engines that bent space in ways even the Varaxians did not fully understand. And weapons that made everything in the galaxy look like toys. The antimatter cannon was the masterpiece. 3 decades of work, thousands of scientists, trillions of dollars spent in secret. It could fire once every 4 minutes and needed enormous power to operate. But when it fired, nothing could survive. Zyrax finally found his voice. All ships, advance. Concentrate fire on the unknown vessel. Destroy it before it can fire again. The Varaxian fleet surged forward, 12,000 ships moving as one. The space around the Prometheus filled with weapons fire. Beams of energy, missiles, railgun projectiles, plasma torpedoes. Everything the most powerful fleet in the galaxy could throw was directed at a single target. The Prometheus did not move. It simply sat there as the storm of destruction washed over its shields. Golden light rippled across its hull as the energy was absorbed. Inside the ship, power readings actually increased. The shields were drinking the attack, converting it into fuel. The shields are absorbing our weapons, the tactical officer reported, panic creeping into his voice. We are making them stronger. Zyrax could not believe what he was hearing. That was impossible. No shield system worked like that. No technology in the known galaxy could turn enemy fire into power. Launch fighters, he ordered desperately. Get close. Find a weakness. 20,000 fighters screamed toward the Prometheus, the best pilots in the Varaxian Empire at their controls. They were the elite, trained from birth for combat, veterans of countless battles. They had never failed. Captain Rook watched them come. Activate point defense, he said calmly. Standard pattern. The Prometheus came alive with smaller weapons, lasers, plasma cannons, and something new, something that fired bolts of compressed gravity. The fighters entered the defensive zone and began dying immediately. Dozens fell in the first second, then hundreds. The sky became a graveyard of twisted metal and frozen bodies. The surviving fighters pressed on, desperately trying to reach the hull. A few managed to get close enough to fire their weapons directly against the shields. Their shots did nothing. They died moments later, picked off by defensive guns that never missed. In 5 minutes, the fighter swarm was gone. 18,000 pilots had died without doing any damage at all. The Prometheus did not have a single scratch on its paint. Admiral Zyrax stared at the tactical display in shock. His fleet was supposed to be invincible. They had conquered hundreds of worlds without ever facing a real challenge. Now, a single ship had killed more of his forces in minutes than he had lost in his entire career. Fall back, he ordered quietly. All ships, fall back. Regroup at safe distance. The Varaxian fleet began to retreat, pulling away from Earth for the first time since they had arrived. On the planet below, people who had been waiting to die suddenly found themselves still alive. The bombers were gone. The attacks had stopped. Something had changed. In the command center, President Chen watched the enemy fleet withdraw with tears in her eyes. She turned to General Stone with 1,000 questions on her lips. Stone smiled for the first time that day. The Prometheus, Madam President, our secret weapon. We have been building it since before you were born. Why did no one tell me? She asked. Stone shook his head. Some secrets are too dangerous to share. Only for people on Earth knew the Prometheus existed. Now you are the 5th. We needed something that the enemy could not prepare for, something they would never see coming. Surprise was our greatest weapon. On the Prometheus, Captain Rook allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. They had done it. They had stopped the advance. But the battle was not over. 12,000 ships still waited in space, their weapons still hot, their crews still alive. One successful attack did not win a war. Lieutenant Chen turned to him with concern on her face. "Captain, they are regrouping. They will attack again." "I know," Rook replied. "And when they do, we will be ready. The main cannon is our strongest weapon, but it is not our only one. It is time to show them what else we can do." He pressed a button on his command chair, activating a system that had never been tested in combat. Along the spine of the Prometheus, panels opened to reveal weapons that looked almost alien in their design. They were called Void Lances, and they were about to change everything. The next attack was coming, and Captain Rook intended to make it far more costly than the first. The Varaxian fleet hung in space like a wounded animal, licking its wounds and preparing for another strike. Admiral Zyrax had retreated to his private chamber to think, leaving his officers to maintain formation. In all his years of conquest, he had never faced anything like this. A single human ship had humiliated the greatest military force in the galaxy. He pulled up everything they knew about Earth and humanity. Population, 7 billion. Industrial capacity, moderate by galactic standards. Military strengths, supposedly minimal. Nothing in the records suggested they were capable of building the Prometheus. Nothing even hinted at the technology that ship possessed. How he whispered to himself. How did they do it? His thoughts were interrupted by an urgent call from the bridge. "Admiral, we are detecting unusual energy signatures from the enemy vessel. They appear to be activating additional weapon systems." Zyrax rushed back to the command center. The tactical display showed the Prometheus clearly, and new heat signatures were blooming along its spine. Whatever was happening, it was not good for his fleet. He made a quick decision. "We cannot let them prepare. All ships attack now. Maximum force. Concentrate everything on that ship before they can fire." The Varaxian fleet surged forward once more. 11,800 ships moving in a massive wave of destruction. They abandoned formation and tactics, choosing instead to overwhelm the enemy through sheer numbers. Every weapon on every ship fired at once. The amount of energy directed at the Prometheus would have been enough to shatter a moon. Captain Rook had expected this. "They're coming," he observed calmly. "All hands, battle stations. Prepare to engage." The Prometheus moved for the first time in the battle, sliding sideways to present its broadside to the enemy. The Void Lances deployed fully, 12 massive weapons that hummed with power that seemed to bend light around them. "Target the lead ships," Rook ordered. "Fire when ready." The Void Lances activated. Unlike the antimatter cannon, they did not fire beams of light. Instead, they created something else entirely. Points of absolute darkness appeared in space, perfect spheres of nothing that sucked in everything around them. They were artificial singularities, miniature black holes that lasted only seconds but destroyed everything they touched. The lead Varaxian ships had no chance. 12 vessels simply collapsed inward, crushed into points smaller than atoms before the singularities faded. The ships behind them were pulled off course by the gravity wells, crashing into each other in confusion. Zyrax watched in horror as his disciplined fleet dissolved into chaos. Ships tumbled out of control, their pilots unable to fight against forces they did not understand. Weapons fire went wild, some shots actually hitting friendly vessels in the confusion. The Void Lances fired again and again. Each volley claimed more ships either destroyed directly by the singularities or killed in the chaos that followed. In 10 minutes, over 500 Varaxian vessels were gone. But Zyrax was not a fool, and he learned quickly. "Pull back the larger ships," he commanded. "Send in the destroyers in small groups, to make them waste their heavy weapons on smaller targets." The surviving fleet reorganized, with hundreds of destroyers rushing forward in waves while the battlecruisers and carriers hung back. It was a brutal strategy, sacrificing smaller ships to drain the enemy's ammunition. Rook saw what they were doing and nodded with grim respect. "They are adapting," he said. "Switch to secondary weapons. Save the lances for the heavy ships." The Prometheus revealed yet more surprises. Plasma cannons that fired faster than anything the Varaxians had ever seen. Railguns that accelerated projectiles to near light speed. Missile systems that released swarms of smart weapons capable of finding their own targets. The destroyers died by the hundreds, but they kept coming, pushing closer and closer to the human vessel. On Earth, Commander Lisa Park had survived the initial battle, and was now leading the remaining human fleet in support of the Prometheus. Her ships were still outmatched, but the enemy was distracted. She saw an opportunity. "All ships, target the carriers," she ordered. "While they are focused on the Prometheus, hit them from behind." The human fleet, now down to barely 400 vessels, looped around the main battle and struck the Varaxian rear. They did not have weapons that could destroy the enemy quickly, but they could damage. Sensor arrays were shot off, hangar doors were welded shut by concentrated laser fire. Engine systems were targeted and disabled. The Varaxians suddenly found themselves fighting on two fronts. Their attention was divided. Their coordination began to fail. Admiral Zyrax felt the battle slipping away from him. His fleet had lost over 2,000 ships. The humans had lost none since the Prometheus arrived. The mathematics of war were turning against him. He still had overwhelming numbers, but numbers meant nothing against weapons that could not be stopped. His crews were afraid now. He could hear it in their voices. see it in their hesitation. They had come here expecting easy victory. They had found something else entirely. A new message arrived from the High Council, transmitted across the vast distance from the home world. The leaders of the Empire were watching the battle through long-range sensors. They had seen everything. Admiral Zyrax. The message read, "Explain this failure. How is one ship defeating our entire fleet?" Zyrax had no answer. He could not explain what he did not understand. On the Prometheus, Captain Rook was managing a complex balance. His ship had taken no damage, but his weapons had limits. The antimatter cannon needed time to recharge between shots. The void lances consumed enormous power. Even the secondary weapons would eventually run out of ammunition if the battle continued. "How are we doing?" he asked his chief engineer, Commander David Kim, a man who had helped build the Prometheus from its first hull plate, studied his displays carefully. "We have used 30% of our main weapon capacity. Shields are still absorbing enemy fire and converting it to power, so our energy reserves are actually increasing. But if they keep throwing ships at us, we will eventually run dry." Rook nodded. "Then we need to end this quickly. Target their flagship. Let us see if they keep fighting when their admiral is dead." The antimatter cannon was fully charged. The targeting computer locked onto the Eternal Dominion, the largest and most impressive ship in the Varaxian fleet. Admiral Zyrax was on that vessel, directing the battle, holding his forces together through sheer will. Lieutenant Chen looked at the firing solution on her screen. "Target locked. Ready to fire on your command, Captain." Rook paused for just a moment. This shot would kill thousands of beings. Aliens, yes. Enemies, certainly, but still living creatures with families and hopes and fears. He had never wanted to be a killer. He had wanted to be an explorer, a scientist, a man of peace. But peace required strength. Peace required the willingness to fight for it. "Fire," he said quietly. The antimatter cannon spoke again. A beam of impossible brightness crossed the void in an instant. The Eternal Dominion, pride of the Varaxian Empire, flagship of their greatest admiral, ceased to exist. Admiral Zyrax never felt his death. One moment he was alive, planning his next attack. The next moment he was atoms. His bridge crew, his officers, his guards, all gone in less than a heartbeat. The heart of the Varaxian fleet had been cut out. Across the remaining ships, panic spread like wildfire. Their admiral was dead. Their flagship was destroyed. The unstoppable weapon was choosing targets at will, and no one knew who would be next. Captain Rook opened a channel to the enemy fleet, now leaderless and afraid. "Varaxian vessels, this is the Prometheus. Your admiral is dead. Your fleet is defeated. Retreat now, and you may live. Continue fighting, and you will all share his fate. The choice is yours." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, one ship after another began to turn away from Earth. Engines flared as the Varaxian fleet started to run, abandoning the conquest that had been meant to teach humanity its place in the galaxy. They were learning a different lesson today. The retreat of the Varaxian fleet was the most watched event in galactic history. Long-range sensors from dozens of species captured every moment. The greatest military power in the known universe, an empire that had never lost a major battle, was running away from a single world, running away from a single ship. Captain Rook did not let them go easily. As the Varaxian vessels turned to flee, the Prometheus pursued, picking off stragglers and those too damaged to maintain formation. The Void Lances claimed another 300 ships. Plasma cannons and railguns added more to the count. By the time the survivors reached the edge of the solar system, the invasion fleet had lost over 4,000 vessels. The rest jumped to faster than light speed and vanished into the darkness between stars. They would not be coming back anytime soon. On Earth, the news spread faster than light could travel. People who had been hiding in shelters emerged into sunlight, looking up at a sky that was no longer filled with enemies. The cheering started in small groups and grew until entire cities were celebrating. Tears of joy mixed with tears of grief for those who had been lost in the initial attacks. But humanity had survived. Against all odds, they had won. President Sarah Chen stood before the cameras to address her people and the galaxy beyond. "Today," she said, her voice strong despite the exhaustion she felt, "we proved that humanity will not bow. We proved that our spirit cannot be broken. We lost many brave souls in this battle, and we honor their sacrifice. But we also showed the universe something important. We showed them that Earth is not easy prey." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "For 50 years, we knew this day would come. For 50 years, we prepared in secret, building weapons and training crews that the galaxy knew nothing about. We did not want war. We never wanted war. But when war came to us, we were ready. The Prometheus was our answer to those who thought we were weak. Let it be a lesson to any who would threaten our world in the future." In the command center, General Stone watched the president with quiet pride. They had done it. The gamble had paid off. 3 decades of secrets, of lies, of hidden projects and sacrificed careers, all for this moment. It had been worth it. His communication officer approached with a message. "Sir, we are receiving transmissions from multiple alien governments. They are requesting contact with Earth." Stone smiled. It appeared that the galaxy had suddenly become very interested in the small blue planet that had just defeated an empire. Over the following days, the true scale of the victory became clear. The Varaxian Empire had sent 12,000 ships to conquer Earth. Less than 8,000 made it home. It was the worst military defeat in their entire history. The High Council fell within a week, overthrown by angry citizens who blamed them for the disaster. The empire began to fracture. With conquered worlds sensing weakness and pushing for independence, the species that had lived in fear of Varaxian power now looked at Earth with different eyes. Ambassadors arrived from dozens of worlds, seeking friendship and alliance with the humans who had done the impossible. Trade agreements were proposed. Technology sharing was discussed. Earth, which had been isolated and ignored for half a century, suddenly found itself at the center of galactic politics. Captain James Rook brought the Prometheus home to a welcome that overwhelmed him. When his ship entered orbit over Earth, every communication channel was filled with cheering and celebration. Schools were closed. Holidays were declared. His face was on every news screen on the planet. He did not feel like a hero. He felt tired. He felt the weight of every life he had taken, enemy or not. He had done what was necessary. But that did not make it easy. Lieutenant Chen found him alone on the observation deck, staring down at the planet he had saved. She stood beside him in comfortable silence for a long moment. "My mother wants to give you a medal," she said eventually. "Actually, she wants to give you about 50 medals. There is talk of building a statue." Rook managed a small laugh. "I do not need medals. I need sleep. About a month of sleep." She smiled at that. "You earned it, Captain. We all earned it." Rook nodded slowly. "We did. But this is not over, Lieutenant. The Varaxians will rebuild. Other empires will look at what happened here and wonder if they should try next. We cannot rely on surprise forever. The Prometheus is just one ship. We need a fleet." Chen raised an eyebrow. "Are you planning our next war already?" He shook his head. "No, I am planning how to prevent one. The best way to keep the peace is to be strong enough that no one dares break it. We showed the galaxy what one ship can do. Now we need to show them what 10 ships can do, or 100. Far across the galaxy, in the ruins of the Varaxian capital, a young officer named Korax watched the reports from the Earth battle with burning eyes. His father had died on the Eternal Dominion, killed by the human weapon, along with Admiral Xerax. His family name, once honored throughout the Empire, was now associated with the greatest failure in their history. He would not forget. He would not forgive. Someday, when he had power of his own, he would return to that small blue world and repay the debt in blood. The humans thought they were safe now. They thought their single ship made them invincible. They were wrong. Korax began making plans. The Empire might be falling apart, but he would build something new from the ruins. Something stronger. Something that would not fail the way his father had failed. The war was not over. It was just beginning. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. The damaged cities were rebuilt. The fallen soldiers were buried with honor. Schools taught the story of the Battle of Earth, and children grew up dreaming of serving on ships like the Prometheus. General Stone retired from the military, his great secret finally revealed and his mission completed. He wrote his memoirs, careful to praise the thousands of people who had made the Prometheus possible while downplaying his own role. He spent his remaining years tending a garden and watching the stars, remembering a time when those stars had seemed threatening instead of full of possibility. President Chen won re-election easily and spent her second term building the alliances and infrastructure that would protect Earth for generations to come. The construction of new vessels began, ships that incorporated everything learned from the Prometheus. By the time she left office, Earth had a fleet of 20 ships that could match anything in the known galaxy. Captain Rook took command of the first human deep space exploration mission, leading a squadron of 5 vessels to the edges of known space. He never lost his reluctance to fight, but he never hesitated when fighting was necessary. His crew loved him. His enemies feared him. His legend grew with every passing year. Lieutenant Sarah Chen became Admiral Chen, commander of the growing Earth defense fleet. She married and had children who grew up hearing stories of the day their grandmother watched Earth burn and their mother helped save it. Her daughter eventually took command of the Prometheus itself. Continuing the family tradition, the galaxy had changed forever on that day when a single human ship stopped an invasion cold. Species that had considered themselves masters of the universe now had to accept that humans were their equals. The old order was crumbling and something new was being born. It would be a universe where humanity had a voice, a universe where Earth was respected instead of ignored, a universe where the people of that small blue planet could look up at the stars and know they had earned their place among them. The Prometheus hung in orbit, its weapons silent, its crew at rest, but everyone knew that if the call came again, if another fleet threatened their home, the ship would be ready. The Titan who stole fire from the gods had done his work, and now, armed with that fire, humanity would never bow again. The story of Earth had only just begun.